group cohesion is a human survival advantage. And to move forward with or without Christianity, that's something that we will need to figure out for sure. I don't agree that Christianity would be the one I would pick. I would pick secular humanism, which, in the extent that it advocates for human flourishing and reduction of harm, I think those are the two key components that I would want to pull out of Christianity anyway.
When you come down to Paul, and I do a thought experiment on, okay, let's just pretend for a second that secular humanism is the way to go. And man, if we could just all rally around that. And what if we had a whole bunch of, let's suppose we get 50% of the world to become secular humanists, and the world is, it's getting pretty populated. There's a lot of people. And the consensus of the secular humanists is, you know what? If we could just rid the world of these other ideas once and for all, then we would finally all be on the same page. And 100 years from now, we're going to have, 50 times more people than that other half right now. So for human flourishing to really continue, let's go ahead and eliminate. I mean, people are going to die anyway at some point. I mean, everybody does. So the timing kind of becomes irrelevant. Why don't we just go ahead and eliminate this half? I'm going with 50-50 just for a number, but let's eliminate this half.
You want to Thanos this thing up? I gotcha.
Yeah. Well, that is true. That is kind of what it was. I didn't even think of that. That's funny. Let's go ahead and eliminate this half in order to bring about future flourishing that ends up being way better. Is that, like, when you think of that thought experiment, could you go, yeah, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, I could see that, and would that be good? Would that, like, how do you process a thought experiment like that?
One, I mean, if you want to, there's plenty of debates about whether Thanos was right. You can go look at those online. We won't talk about that here.
Never done that.
Everything's online. So there's that. You mentioned two separate things that I want to address separately. One was, would you get rid of other religions? And I did you mean like through killing them or through?
Yeah. Basically, we got half the world now says we're secular humanists, and they're getting along great. And man, society is growing and commerce is happening, and we're not cheating, we're not stealing because we don't want to bring harm. And man, everybody's doing it right. And we got half of them that's like, man, your religion is holding us back. This is holding us back. And in light of human flourishing for 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, if we just take this little tiny compared to 1,000 years from now, yeah, we'd all be way better off. Why don't we do that? Can you see that kind of, yeah, and actually like eliminate killing, like however you wanted to bury them, shoot them, drown them, the old guillotine. That's kind of irrelevant to, in order to get future human flourishing, we need to call humanity and get us back down to the healthy ones of that. And this is only healthy in mind, not even talking about healthy in body.
Right. So I suppose those arguments could be put forth. I think you would have a very limited view of human flourishing if you only looked at the population in general. I gave the very brief.
Can you explain that?
Sure. So human flourishing, the way a secular humanist would talk about human flourishing, it has really two parts. There is the individual. There's the flourishing of an individual and the flourishing of humanity. And under secular humanism, both are considered to be egregious. And in fact, and some would even expand it beyond humans. That's why a lot of people like that argue for veganism and that kind of thing, because they're looking at the individual plate and the individual chicken. So in a way, it's tough for me to see a secular humanist in that vein who tries to always balance individual suffering and societal suffering as both valid. I think that for the scenario you put forth, which isn't implausible, they would need to be rejecting that portion of it. Now, I think we would all agree, like, terrible things have been done in the names of religion when people selectively picked parts of the teaching to go by. You would agree with this. There were slave owners who felt they were Christians, for example. There was crusades who felt like they were doing things. So I would say an adherence to the kind of secular humanism that I would advocate, that would be impossible. But I understand in your thought experiment where if you define human flourishing as only applying to the group and only over a long, long term, sure, I get why those arguments be put forth. The nice thing about secular humanism is that these are discussions to be had, to be strategies towards a goal. And I would find it difficult to think that would be something that would be adopted. But yeah, I get it. I think that would be a new religion that would be something else. But
I think that when I think through the thought experiment, I'm thinking both individual and society as a whole. I mean, if we ran the numbers and said, listen, by eliminating let's just say 4 billion people right now, which is a lot of people. By eliminating 4 billion people now, we're actually going to, and we'll do it in a way that is, we'll eliminate them in a way that doesn't hurt them at all. We can cease them to exist, or, it's very, it's all just put to sleep. That way there's no pain. It's just, wow, you're just put to sleep. And I ran the numbers and said, but then over the next 1,000 years, we're going to have 300 billion individuals living in a society that is way better off. Their individual flourishing is going to skyrocket. And if we don't do that, then we're not only going to have these 4 billion, we're going to have 100 billion more that are actually not doing as good individually. And we literally run the numbers. So I am thinking both individual and as humanity as a whole. Does that make sense?
I mean, it makes sense. That is not this kind of secular humanism that I would hold to. That, because again, the individual absolutely has to be. So you're putting someone to sleep even as painlessly as possible. You are ending their life against their will. So that is really the ultimate, for a sentient being. That is the ultimate harm, is to take that choice away from them as to whether to live. But I guess I get your thought experiment. I get where that might go. I could absolutely probably even write a paper if I wanted to just adopt that side of it and write the advocacy paper, because I think that I was kind of laughing when you said, hey, if we were all secular humanists, the world would be we'd be full of population. I'm like, no, secularists tend to not have kids because they tend to think that the world is overpopulated as it is. So those are and that's partially why Christianity might win, is because you're outbreeding us. I guess I get where that's going. I get where that would be. That would just be an alternative version of secular humanism that I don't think is the correct one. So there are ideologies. And of course, you look at Hitler, right? So we're having a discussion about philosophies of Hitler has to come up. I'm glad it took this long. Hitler had a similar view of the world, right? He was going to create the best possible human race and cull the world to certain people. But the rest of the world corrected for that, right? The rest of the world saw what was happening and eventually became so egregious that they realized that human flourishing was being negatively affected by this diseased force. And so I have to feel like even in that 50-50 scenario, the 50% of the world that for whom this would negatively affect would correct the error. I feel like Hitler is a great example of how we don't have to worry about morality. If we all adhere to the same tenets of morality, we don't have to worry about a Hitler convincing people all this, because their views are too negatively affecting of too many people. That's a weird tangent to go on. But that's about.
Sorry, I probably derailed us there. I was just like, I wonder. That just literally is
when you want to do your Thanos is right mug, that's
No, I didn't even think of Thanos. I just thinking in that world, is this what would happen?